I'm still reeling from it, honestly. Just a few days ago, I got this call from Chloe, my ex-wife Jessica's younger sister. And she just told me Jessica was in the hospital. Suicide attempt. An overdose of sleeping pills. It hit me like a physical blow. The world kind of tilted for a second. Because, for years, Jessica had been this, well, almost ghost from our past. And suddenly, she was stark, terrifying reality again. But to really get where we are now, to understand how we even got to that phone call, you need to know about the last 9 years. It feels like a lifetime ago, but it all started when I was 41. Jessica, my wife at the time, was 40. We had been married for almost 8 years, with 2 amazing kids, Emily, our daughter, who was 7, and Ethan, our son, just 5. From the outside, we were the picture of a happy, normal family living in the suburbs of Charlotte, North Carolina. I had a stable job as a software engineer, making enough for our modest home. Jessica worked part-time, which gave her the flexibility to be home when the kids got out of school. We weren't wealthy, but we were comfortable. Looking back, the cracks started appearing about a year before she left. Jessica began spending an obsessive amount of time on social media. She was completely captivated by these boss babe influencers, these women who projected this image of having it all, successful businesses, freedom from the 9-to-5 grind, perfect lives. She'd constantly show me their posts, all about taking control of your destiny and breaking free from societal expectations. I didn't think much of it then. I figured it was just a phase, or maybe she was feeling a bit restless. Then came the weekend empowerment seminars. They weren't cheap, usually somewhere between $500 to $1,000 a pop. But she'd insist they were investments in her future. She'd come back from these events buzzing, full of new jargon about abundance mindsets and stepping into her power. The credit card bills started piling up, but if I tried to talk about our budget, she'd accuse me of limiting her potential, of being afraid of her success. These seminars led to her joining what she called a mastermind group. It was essentially a bunch of women who met weekly at upscale coffee shops or wine bars to discuss their entrepreneurial journeys. From what I could gather, most of them were either involved in multi-level marketing, trying to become life coaches with 0 qualifications, or brand consultants without any actual clients. Our home life started falling apart. She was constantly glued to her phone, scrolling Instagram or on long calls with her new friends. The kids would ask for help with homework, and she'd just brush them off, saying she was networking. Family dinners became rare, and when they did happen, she'd spend the entire time talking about her grand plans to launch a personal branding agency, despite having no business plan or experience whatsoever. Then came the morning that changed everything. I woke up to find a note on her pillow. Just a note. It said she needed to find herself and live authentically. That she felt stifled by family life and deserved to explore her potential without being held back. There was no mention of the kids, no real explanation of where she was going, just that she needed space and would be in touch. I was devastated. The kids were heartbroken and utterly confused. Emily kept asking, "Doesn't Mommy love us anymore?" Ethan, who was too young to fully grasp it, would stand by the window every evening, waiting for her to come home. It was gut-wrenching. I called her parents, her friends, even her workplace. No one knew where she'd gone. I was about to file a missing person report when she finally texted, 3 days later, saying she was safe and beginning her journey. She asked for time and space and said she'd explain everything when the time was right. A week later, divorce papers arrived. She was filing on grounds of irreconcilable differences. Her new address was an apartment downtown, about 30 minutes from our home. What shocked me most was that she wasn't asking for custody of the kids, only occasional visitation rights. It was like she was abandoning not just me, but them too. I hired a lawyer immediately. Given the circumstances, I was advised I had a very strong case for full custody. She had abandoned the family home and shown minimal interest in being a primary caregiver. The divorce proceedings were surprisingly straightforward. She didn't contest anything regarding the kids, only asking for some personal belongings and a small portion of our savings, far less than she was actually entitled to. It was as if she wanted a clean break from her old life, including her own children. During all of this, I was just trying to hold it together. I had to explain to the kids why mommy wasn't coming home, arrange for childcare, maintain my job, and deal with my own grief and anger. My parents were absolute saviors. They moved in temporarily to help with the transition. My boss was incredibly understanding, allowing me to work flexible hours and sometimes from home. As for Jessica, her communication was minimal. She'd text occasionally asking about the kids, but rarely followed through on the visitation schedule the court had established. When she did see them, it was awkward and brief. She'd take them to a restaurant or a movie, but she visibly struggled to connect. The kids would come home confused and upset, asking why mommy didn't want to live with us anymore. Through mutual acquaintances, I learned she had rebranded herself on social media as a lifestyle entrepreneur and mindset coach. Her profile showed no evidence of her being a mother or having been married. It was like we had never existed. She was posting heavily filtered photos at networking events, motivational quotes, and vague descriptions of her thriving business. From what I could piece together, she was basically doing odd social media jobs for small businesses while desperately trying to build her personal brand. About a year after she left, I discovered she had joined what I can only describe as a cult-like program. It wasn't religious, but it had all the markers of predatory group dynamics, expensive membership fees, isolation from negative influences, which apparently included family, pressure to recruit others, and blind devotion to the leader, a woman who called herself Tiffany Bloom. I later found out her real name was Tara Johnson, a former failed real estate agent from Nebraska. This group seemed to prey specifically on women who were dissatisfied with their lives, promising them wealth, freedom, and fulfillment if they just invested in themselves and followed the program. The investment, of course, meant thousands of dollars in courses, retreats, and one-on-one coaching sessions. Over the next 2 years, Jessica's visits with the kids became even more sporadic. Sometimes she'd cancel last minute, leaving Emily in tears. Meanwhile, I was doing my best to rebuild our lives. I joined a support group for single parents, which was immensely helpful. I also started dating again, cautiously. I met Sarah, a kindergarten teacher and fellow single parent, about 3 years after my divorce. We took things slowly, mindful of how it might affect the kids, but they adored her. She was patient and kind, never trying to replace their mother, but offering steady support and love. 5 years after the divorce, Sarah and I got married in a small ceremony with just family and close friends. By then, Emily was 12 and Ethan was 10, old enough to understand what was happening. They were both genuinely happy about the marriage. Emily even served as one of Sarah's bridesmaids. Sarah legally adopted the kids a year later with Jessica's permission, which she gave easily, without much discussion. It was bittersweet. On one hand, my children now had a loving, present mother figure. On the other, it formalized what we already knew. Their biological mother had chosen to step away from her role in their lives almost completely. Life settled into a new normal. The kids thrived with stability and consistent love. Ethan became an avid soccer player, and Emily discovered a passion for art and computer programming. Sarah and I had a baby boy, Leo, now 2 years old, whom the older kids adore. We moved to a slightly bigger house in the same school district, wanting to maintain the kids' friendships and routines. Then, about 2 weeks ago, out of the blue, I received a text from Jessica, asking if we could meet. It had been almost 9 years since she left. In that time, she had seen the kids maybe 20 times total, always briefly. Her last visit had been over a year ago, a quick lunch where she spent most of the time on her phone. I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop near my office. I wasn't sure what to expect, but what I found was shocking. The glamorous, confident boss babe persona she had cultivated online was nowhere to be seen. Instead, she looked tired, much older than her 40 years. After some awkward small talk, she got to the point. She wanted to come back into the kids' lives. Not just for occasional visits, but regularly. She said she had been doing deep personal work and realized that walking away from her family had been the biggest mistake of her life. Her business ventures had all failed, leaving her in significant debt. The group she was in had eventually imploded amid accusations of financial impropriety against the founder, leaving many women, including Jessica, feeling betrayed and lost. She told me she was now working as an administrative assistant at an insurance company, the kind of 9-to-5 job she had once scorned as living in a cage. She had been in therapy for the past year and was, in her words, facing the reality of my choices. She said she missed the kids terribly and wanted a chance to make amends. I told her I would need to think about it and talk to Sarah and the kids. I wasn't going to make unilateral decisions about something that affected our whole family, especially children who had already been hurt by her once. When I got home, the first thing I did was talk to Sarah. She was understandably worried, but also incredibly supportive, like she always is. Her main focus, just like mine, was doing what was best for the kids. We both agreed that before making any decisions, we should speak to them separately. We didn't want our own opinions or feelings to influence their thoughts. It was important that they had the space to process it on their own. Emily, who's 16 now, had a very strong reaction. She didn't hold back. She made it clear that she didn't consider Jessica her mom. For her, Sarah is the one who's been there, the one who showed up and stuck around. Emily brought up a lot of painful memories, how many times she had waited for her birth mom to visit, only to be left disappointed. Those memories weren't just stories to her, they were real moments of pain and abandonment that had left their mark. She couldn't understand why she should open up to someone who hadn't been there when it mattered most. Ethan, who's 14, had a more subdued but still conflicted response. He doesn't remember as much about his biological mom because he was so young when she left. But that didn't mean he wasn't affected. He grew up knowing that she had walked away, and he's had his own share of letdowns, missed calls, broken promises, visits that never happened. He said he didn't really know her. And from the way he said it, I could tell that made him feel unsure and uneasy. He wasn't angry the way his sister was, but there was a quiet sadness in him that spoke volumes. After those conversations, I got back in touch with Jessica. I tried to explain things gently. I told her the kids weren't ready for a relationship with her right now. I also suggested that if she truly wanted to reconnect, maybe it would be better to start slow, send letters or emails, give the kids a chance to respond on their own terms, without any pressure. I thought that might be a fair and respectful way to begin rebuilding trust, if that's what she really wanted. But her reaction completely caught me off guard. She got defensive right away, accusing me of turning the kids against her. She said I'd brainwashed them, that no child would reject their own mother unless someone had poisoned them. Then she went a step further and said she'd go to court if she had to, insisting she had a right to see them. I was shocked. After years of almost no contact and barely any involvement, suddenly she was talking about legal action. I reminded her calmly, but clearly, that she had willingly given up custody years ago. She had even signed the papers allowing Sarah to adopt the kids. Her rights were limited by choices she made, not by anything I did. But she didn't seem to hear any of that. She ended the conversation in tears, blaming me for everything, saying I had stolen her children and ruined her life. I hung up feeling shaken and confused, not knowing what she might do next. That evening, I sat down with the kids. Again, this time with Sarah there, too. I didn't want to hide anything from them. I told them about the conversation I had with their biological mom and the possibility that she might try to push for contact through the courts. I wanted them to be prepared, just in case. Emily was furious. She said there was no way she would agree to see her, and I could tell she meant it. Ethan didn't say much, but he nodded in agreement with his sister. They were both firm in their stance. I then contacted my lawyer, who confirmed what many of you have probably already figured out: Jessica had very little legal standing, given the adoption and her history of minimal involvement. He advised me to continue documenting her attempts at contact and any potential boundary violations. The following day, I received an email from Jessica, a stark contrast in tone from our coffee shop conversation. She apologized for her emotional reaction and for threatening legal action. She said she had spoken to a lawyer who confirmed her lack of standing. She wrote that she was coming to terms with the consequences of her choices and would respect the kids' boundaries. She asked if she could write them letters instead of seeing them in person, saying she understood they needed time and space. This approach felt more reasonable to me. I showed the email to Emily first. She read it silently, then said, "She can write if she wants. I don't promise to write back." Ethan had a similar reaction, willing to receive letters, but making no commitments about responding. I then consulted with Dr. Miller, our family therapist. She thought letters could be a controlled way to begin communication if the kids were comfortable with it. She suggested having the letters come to me first, so I could ensure there was nothing manipulative or inappropriate before passing them on. So, I responded to Jessica, setting clear boundaries. She could send letters or emails to me, and I would share them with the kids if the content was appropriate. I emphasized that the kids would decide if and when to respond, and she needed to respect their pace. I also made it clear that any return to threatening behavior would end this arrangement immediately. She agreed to these terms, seeming grateful for any opportunity to connect. I was cautiously optimistic, but still wary. People don't change overnight, and her pattern had always been inconsistent at best. Sarah, bless her, continued to be incredibly supportive. She told me she was secure in her relationship with the kids and didn't feel threatened by their biological mother reaching out. They know who's been there for them, she said. But they're getting old enough to form their own opinions and make their own choices about relationships. I'm so thankful for her wisdom and strength. Jessica sent the first letters to the kids 3 days later. I read them before passing them on. They were actually quite appropriate, apologetic without being manipulative, acknowledging her long absence, expressing interest in their lives now without making demands. I gave them to the kids, who read them privately. Neither wanted to respond immediately, but they didn't seem upset by the content. Emily just said, "It's weird to get a letter from a stranger who knows all about you." Which I thought was a pretty insightful observation. But things then escalated in ways I didn't expect. Yesterday afternoon, I received a call from the kids' school. Jessica had shown up there, trying to see them. The school, thankfully, followed their security protocols and didn't allow her access, as she's not on the approved list of people who can pick them up. The front office staff called me immediately. I left work and went to the school where I found Jessica arguing with the principal. When she saw me, she started crying, saying she couldn't wait any longer and just wanted to see their faces. The principal took us to a private room where I tried to calm her down and understand what had happened. Through tears, she explained that after sending the letters, she had become increasingly anxious about not hearing back. She convinced herself that I was intercepting her messages and not giving them to the kids. Her solution was to go to their school. She seemed genuinely surprised when I told her it had only been 3 days since they received her letters. Hardly enough time to process them and respond. The principal, who was aware of our family situation in broad strokes, was firm but compassionate. She explained to Jessica that the school had strict protocols for student safety, and showing up unannounced was not acceptable, regardless of biological connections. Jessica apologized, seemingly embarrassed by her behavior once it was laid out like that. I took her outside to talk privately. I reminded her of our agreement and emphasized that ambushing the kids at school was exactly the kind of boundary violation that would make me reconsider allowing any contact. She seemed to understand, apologizing repeatedly and promising it wouldn't happen again. I was willing to give her one more chance, but things took another turn when the kids got home. They had heard about the incident from classmates. News travels fast in high school. Emily was furious, calling it psycho behavior. Ethan was visibly anxious, asking if she could just show up at our house, too. I assured them both that their home was safe and that I would be reinforcing boundaries with their biological mother. Emily then dropped a bombshell. She had looked up her mother's social media accounts and found recent posts that concerned her. Apparently, Jessica had been posting about reuniting with her precious children and reclaiming her role as their mother. There were vague references to overcoming obstacles put in place by negative influences, which I assumed meant me. Most disturbingly, she had shared childhood photos of the kids that must have been from before she left, presenting an image of continued motherhood that simply didn't match reality. Emily was livid, feeling like her life and image were being used to create a false narrative. "She's still fake," she said, "just in a different way now." Ethan asked if we could change the locks on our house, which broke my heart. After getting the kids settled, I called Jessica. The conversation was difficult. I told her about the kids' reactions to both the school incident and her social media posts. I explained that presenting herself online as an active mother in their lives was dishonest and hurtful to them. I also made it clear that any further boundary violations would result in me seeking a restraining order. She alternated between apologetic and defensive, claiming she was just trying to manifest positive change with her posts. When I pointed out that using the kids' images and misrepresenting her relationship with them wasn't manifestation, but manipulation, she grew quiet. Eventually, she agreed to take down the posts and promised again to respect our boundaries. She sounded subdued and said she would step back and reconsider her approach. I didn't know if I believed her this time. I felt angry and protective, but also sad for everyone involved. The kids were shaken, and I hated seeing them go through this stress. But part of me also felt pity for Jessica, who seemed so desperate to reclaim what she threw away years ago that she was making irrational decisions. Then came Chloe's call. After Jessica's sister told me about the suicide attempt, I was immediately concerned about whether this was related to Emily's letter. But Chloe assured me that while the letter might have been a contributing factor, Jessica had been struggling with severe depression for months, possibly years, following the collapse of her entrepreneurial dreams and the group that had taken so much of her money and time. She had been in therapy but had recently stopped going and had run out of her prescribed antidepressants about a week ago. Chloe asked if I would tell the kids, feeling they had a right to know, but understanding if I wanted to shield them from this information. After consulting quickly with Sarah and Dr. Miller by phone, I decided to tell them in an age-appropriate way, with Dr. Miller present via video call for support. Their reactions were complex. Emily initially worried that her letter had caused the suicide attempt, but Dr. Miller helped her understand that people's actions of this nature stem from deep internal struggles, not from a single letter, no matter how direct. Ethan was quiet, but asked thoughtful questions about mental health and whether his biological mother would be okay. We assured them both that she was receiving good care and that Chloe was with her. We emphasized that this situation was not their responsibility to fix, but that we would support them in whatever feelings came up around it. Today, I received another call from Chloe. Jessica is physically stable and has been transferred to the psychiatric unit for further evaluation and treatment. She will likely be there for at least a week. The hospital found Emily's letter during their standard search of her belongings upon admission. Chloe wanted me to know that after talking with the psychiatrist, they don't believe the letter was a primary trigger for the attempt. Rather, it seemed to be the culmination of years of regret and unprocessed grief, as Chloe put it. Chloe also revealed something I hadn't known. Apparently, Jessica had been planning to move back to her hometown in Vermont next month, having secured a job transfer within her insurance company. Chloe speculated that the impending move, combined with the failed attempt to reconnect with the kids, might have triggered a crisis of reckoning with her life choices. After this call, I sat down with the kids again. I updated them on their biological mother's condition and shared the information about her planned move. Emily seemed relieved that she would be physically farther away, but also expressed sympathy for her struggles. Ethan asked if we could send flowers or a card to the hospital, which surprised me, but also made me incredibly proud of his compassion. We agreed as a family to send a simple bouquet with a card wishing her healing and peace. The kids both signed their names, just their names, no love or familial terms, which felt like an appropriate boundary. Chloe has promised to keep me updated on Jessica's condition and has asked if she could stay in touch with the kids through letters or emails, even after her sister moves to Vermont. She has been estranged from Jessica for many years due to the cult involvement, but reconnected recently when Jessica reached out for support during her depression. The kids seem open to corresponding with their aunt, who they have some positive early childhood memories of. I'm left with deeply mixed feelings about this whole situation. There's relief that Jessica will be physically distant and receiving the mental health care she clearly needs. There's sadness for the years lost and the pain everyone has experienced. And there's a cautious hope that maybe, with proper boundaries and expectations, the kids might eventually have some kind of healthy relationship with their biological mother, or at least with their aunt. Sarah continues to be my rock through all of this, offering wisdom and support without judgment. Last night, she said something that really resonated with me: families come in all forms, and sometimes they change shape over time. What matters is that there's love and respect at the foundation. So, that's where we stand now. Not the resolution I expected, but perhaps the beginning of a healthier chapter for everyone involved. I'm just a dad trying to do the right thing, and I've learned that while we can't control others' choices, we can control how we respond to them. And sometimes, the most loving response, both for ourselves and others, is to maintain firm boundaries while still offering compassion from a distance. What would you have done in my shoes?